So now that we know about mitosis, let's talk about asexual reproduction, which uses mitosis as a basis for asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction, because it uses mitosis as its method for reproducing, only requires one parent. As it goes through the process of mitosis, it is going to produce two offspring that are identical to the parent and to one another. Genetically identical, because the goal of mitosis is to produce genetically identical daughter cells. We call these genetically identical cells diploid cells, which just means that they have a full set of chromosomes. And we're going to see that it means something special when we start talking about meiosis later on, opposed to the other type of cell that it could be. Now, one of the advantages of asexual reproduction is that if you have a single organism in an environment, it can produce a large amount of offspring just simply by going through mitosis multiple times. There are 5 types of asexual reproduction: binary fission, fragmentation, budding, spore formation, and vegetative reproduction. We're going to look at each one in detail next. Binary fission produces offspring that are generally smaller than their parent because they have to go through that division process. You're taking a larger cell, dividing it into 2 to get 2 smaller offspring that'll eventually grow and go through the same process that the parent organism went through. Now, this is great because it can produce rapid growth in no time. For instance, in some types of bacteria, the population can double every 20 minutes. So, for example, if you had something like paramecium or bacteria, they could actually go through binary fission in 20 minutes. Now, let's think about this. If you have a single cell bacteria, and let's say it was a harmful bacteria, after 20 minutes, there would be 2. After 40 minutes, there would be 4. After 1 hour, there would be 8. Well, that doesn't sound too dangerous. Let me put it another way. What if the single-cell bacteria landed in a big pot of chili that you were making at nighttime, and you accidentally left it out on the counter, and you were going to serve it for dinner 24 hours later? Well, that single bacteria over the course of 24 hours would become 470 billion trillion bacteria. That's a lot. And if you don't know what that means, it means that people get sick from your food, and you unfortunately will have a whole bunch of people with food poisoning. Not ideal. Let's watch a short video on binary fission. Let's talk next about fragmentation. Fragment just means to break apart. So if we have a small piece of an organism breaks away from it, it can actually develop into a completely new genetically identical individual. That's kind of cool. For example, if we took something like a starfish, maybe you walk by the ocean, you've seen a starfish, they usually have 5 arms coming out from their body. What you don't realize is that if you take that starfish and you cut one of those legs off, and if you include part of the middle part of it and throw it into the ocean, that one leg will grow an entire new starfish. So you could theoretically take those 5 legs, cut them up, throw them into the ocean, and over time, those would become 5 brand new starfish. This also happens with moss and with worms, and it also happens with freshwater hydra. You can see in the diagram that we have here that the parent hydra, if it gets cut or chopped or fragmented in any way, whatever piece is left over will grow into 3 brand new daughter hydra that may be smaller to start with, but will eventually grow to the same size as their parent hydra. Now let's talk about budding. Budding is when a group of rapidly dividing cells, a growth, develops on an organism and then breaks away to become a brand new organism. For example, this happens in freshwater hydra, some sponges, and other invertebrates. It also happens in fungi. Budding is one of the characteristics of yeast, and if you've ever baked bread before, you know that the first thing you do to start your bread is you activate the yeast by usually putting it in some warm water with some sugar, and that's how you activate your yeast. Let's watch yeast go through budding. When a parent organism produces small, tiny spores as part of it that they can be released off into the environment. Spores are single cells that can develop into new individuals by repeated mitosis. Some examples would be bread mold. If you've ever let something get moldy in the cupboard, bread get moldy, or something else get moldy, if you look really close, you'll see fine little tiny spores on the end of these little finger-like structures that are coming out. This is how they send out their spores into the world. It also happens with bacteria, microorganisms, and puffballs. You've ever been walking along in the grass and you see those cool little puffballs, and you squish one and it puffs? Don't breathe those in, because those are all spores that, given the right circumstances, could grow into new puffballs wherever they land. Here we can see that we have bread mold growing off the bread. The little tiny sporangium is coming up, and it has the spores on top. When wind or a movement causes that to shake the spores off, that's when the spores are released into the environment. Vegetative reproduction. This is when special cells, usually in the stems and roots of plants, divide repeatedly to form structures that develop into a plant that is identical to the parent. Some examples include strawberry plants, potatoes, bulbs, and if you have one in your home, a spider plant. Just like a strawberry plant, spider plants go through the exact same thing. Once you have a parent plant, it'll send off a little shoot. And if that shoot, wherever it lands, it'll grow into an entire new plant. Okay, so now we know all 5 types of asexual reproduction. We know about binary fission. We know that bacteria often will go through binary fission because they're simple organisms. We know about fragmentation, which is what the hydra, the starfish, will go through. We know about budding, which is what yeast will go through, and on many other forms of bacteria, microorganisms. We know about spore formation, which a lot of mushrooms, a lot of fungi will go through, mold. And last, we know about vegetative reproduction, which is what a lot of plants will go through in order to reproduce.